In our alternate timeline, the tipping point came in 2028. That year, satellites recorded something unprecedented. A sudden, massive collapse of West Antarctica's Pine Island and Thwaites glaciers. A freshwater deluge, equal to decades of rainfall, spilled into the Southern Ocean. The planet didn't feel it at first, but the ocean did. Currents began to warp. Salinity levels in the North Atlantic plummeted, and deep in the abyss, where cold water once sank into the dark, something stopped. The Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, the great ocean conveyor, stalled. At first, it was a scientific curiosity, headlines buried beneath celebrity scandals. But within months, the first real signs arrived. Quiet, creeping, and impossible to ignore. Jet streams began to shift. Storm tracks wandered off course. Winter came early to Canada and never left. Southern Europe braced for drought, but instead faced blizzards. Spring failed to arrive in Berlin. Paris broke cold weather records in June. It was no longer a climate system. It was climate chaos. By 2030, the shutdown was confirmed. The Gulf Stream, the engine of modern civilization, had collapsed. And now, the chain reaction began. By 2032, the dominoes had fallen. Western Europe, once warmed by the Gulf Stream, plunged into a deep freeze. Average temperatures dropped by up to 15 degrees Celsius. French vineyards became frozen ruins. The Netherlands, once protected by dikes, faced not floods, but permafrost. Berlin, Warsaw, Kiev, transformed into cities of eternal march. In this new climate regime, seasons became erratic, unrecognizable. Summers vanished, crops failed, and with them, economies. The chill reached across the Atlantic. Eastern Canada and the U.S. Northeast were hammered by relentless snow and ice. New York became a fortress city, struggling to keep the lights on. Florida saw its first blizzard in recorded history. But where the North froze, the South burned. The tropics overheated. The Amazon caught fire, again and again, until it became a wasteland. Monsoon systems in India failed unpredictably, devastating millions. Deserts expanded. Sea levels rose faster than models had predicted, swallowing coastlines in Africa and Southeast Asia. Global agriculture teetered on collapse. Corn no longer grew in the Midwest. Wheat fields turned to tundra in Ukraine. Rice yields shrank across Asia. With every crop failure, panic spread. Nations hoarded. Trade routes froze or fractured. 1 billion people began to move southward, chasing warmth, chasing food, and wars followed. By the mid-2040s, the map of civilization had turned upside down. The equator was no longer a boundary, it was a border. The Northern Hemisphere, once the heart of modern power, became inhospitable. Governments fell or retreated behind walls. Cities turned into ghost museums beneath layers of frost. But the South? The South adapted, rebuilt, throve. Australia became a superpower, not through war, but through survival. Harnessing solar energy, desalinated oceans, and AI-managed greenhouses. They transformed their once barren heartland into a lifeboat for civilization. Chile, Argentina, and parts of southern Africa rose with them. New coalitions formed not on ideology, but on climate compatibility. The global economy recalibrated. What once was developing became deciding. New languages became dominant. New currencies. New religions, some hailing the freeze as a divine reckoning, others praying for the return of the warmth. What remained of Europe became a scattered archipelago of icebound enclaves. Refugees in the Alps, bunkers beneath Norway's mountains. A frozen Vatican now preserved as a museum beneath a dome. Ukraine, once fertile, now mirrored Siberia. Its villages buried under meters of snow. Its farmlands frozen solid, but its people still enduring. We once thought climate change would be a slow burn. something for future generations, something we'd have time to manage. But the ocean has its own clock, and when it stopped ticking, so did the world we knew. The collapse of the Gulf Stream was not a single event. It was a pivot, a planetary redirection. It didn't end humanity, but it erased our map of the world and forced us to draw a new one from the bottom up. We now live in a flipped civilization, where the old centers of culture are buried beneath frost, and survival means letting go of borders and remembering the lessons of failure. In this alternate history, we were warned. We had decades of data, and yet we blinked, because the collapse didn't happen in explosions or sirens, but in silence, in the melting of ice, the shifting of salt, the quiet slowing of currents beneath a surface that still looked blue. The Gulf Stream taught us a brutal truth. The most dangerous changes are the ones we don't see. And in the end, nature didn't punish us. It just stopped holding us together. What if the ocean conveyor belt stopped and Europe froze? It sounds like the plot of a disaster movie, but it's not fiction. It's a ticking clock. There's a river in the ocean, one we can't see, but that shapes everything we know. It carries warm water from the equator to the north, and cold water back down south. It's called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, but most know it by one of its strongest components, the Gulf Stream. And it's in trouble. For centuries, this invisible engine has regulated Earth's climate, kept Europe mild, stabilized monsoons, controlled rainfall, crop cycles, even the survival of marine life. But now, something is shifting. Glaciers are melting, seawater is changing, and the system that's held the planet in delicate balance is faltering. In this alternate timeline, we explore a haunting possibility. The year the Gulf Stream collapsed, and the world was never the same again. To understand how it all began, we need to understand what we lost. The Gulf Stream isn't just a warm current, it's a climate superpower. Born in the tropics, it drags immense volumes of warm water northward. This current carries more heat than all the atmosphere's winds combined. It's why London is green, not frozen. Why rain falls in the Sahel. Why hurricanes curve and spin the way they do. But it doesn't flow forever on its own. It's part of a fragile, interconnected system called the thermohaline circulation, driven by two things: temperature and salt. As warm, salty water flows north, it cools, becomes denser, and sinks into the deep ocean. This sinking action pulls more water forward like a conveyor belt. The process is slow, but vast. A single drop of water may take 1,000 years to complete the loop. And this balance? It's more delicate than we ever realized. In the real world, scientists have warned us. The Gulf Stream has slowed by 15% since the mid-20th century. Record-breaking ice melt from Greenland is pouring fresh water into the North Atlantic. And fresh water is lighter, less salty. It disrupts the sinking process. It weakens the current. We are watching the engine sputter. But in our timeline, the world kept running on borrowed time. Now, let's rewind the clock and find the moment everything began to unravel.